Our volume on, Tim? And are we recording this? Is this a YouTube live? All right.
We're hot.
YouTube.
Just want to remind everybody. So it's Thursday, October 21st, 2021, time for the work session of the Wenatchee City Council. And so these are less formal than our normal meetings, and we have a number of items on tonight's agenda, mostly related to public safety and our police department. So I know we've got Chief and both of our captains here. So Captain Chance, I guess we'll talk about Special Services Division. So I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, so actually for those of you that sit on the Public Safety Committee, you got the brief version of the presentation that you're about to get that'll provide a little bit more detail, hopefully answer more of your questions. Just to call out immediately that on the agenda, we originally had scheduled for Sergeant Miller to come in and give a full debrief here at this work session for the council to hear about the activities of SSD, but he has been out sick for a little while and probably will be for a little bit longer. So topics 1 and 2 are essentially going to be covered by me, though I'm up front, I'm not going to be able to provide you the level of detail that Sergeant Miller would be able to on the specifics day in, day out that have been going on with special services. My focus is going to be more on the Columbia River Drug Task Force and the regionalization of that task force, where we're moving towards conceptually talking about now and moving toward combining Wenatchee Police Department's Special Service Division with the Columbia River Drug Task Force. So I'll go ahead and jump into my presentation. So another regional concept that we're talking about with all of our local regional partners. So this first slide is just a little bit of history and development as to how we ended up with this concept getting pitched. I'm going to actually start back a few more years than the first bullet point on this slide. And I'm going to go back to around 2016, 2017 when Chief Crown first took over here at Wenatchee Police Department. We had 36 officers on the book and we were authorized 40. Right around in that first year that he was here, we annexed the old station out in the Ozone. That annexation was followed by not just a staffing shortage with the numbers that I just gave you at 36 of 40, but we had some injuries and things that were long-term there that were impacting our staffing to decrease that even further. So as a result of that, what we found was that we were pulling SSD, our PROACT division, who was by their mission and in their development originally several years prior to this, was intended to address street level drugs, gangs, and just proactive enforcement throughout the city. Because of the staffing levels back in 2016 and 17 and the challenges that we were having, what we found was we were actually pulling all of our people from SSD and we were using them to fill holes in that essential function of patrol law enforcement, which of course is the key or the heart of any law enforcement agency, including Wenatchee Police Department. So we weren't at that time meeting our mission for our PROACT to go out and focus on that law enforcement that they had been designed to conduct. So moving into late 2017, we actually ended up dissolving SSD because we continued to see a sustained challenge in being able to staff patrol. We were constantly listing overtime shifts and multiple overtime shifts often in a single day. So SSD ultimately was dissolved for the purpose of reallocating those resources and bodies back out to the heart of the department at the patrol level. That, in doing so, eliminated 2 PROACT officers and the sergeant position that actually at that time was vacant, but that officially went away and we reallocated all of our staff from that division back into patrol. Moving into 2018, we hit our bottom for our effective staff, and believe it or not, at that time, Wenatchee Police Department was operating with best estimates by the other captain and I today were 28 or 29 effective personnel. out of what was now 41 that we were authorized. So we actually on the books were authorized to add a person, but we still seemed from that effective level of people we could actually put out on the street with considering people that were in FTO and training programs and long-term injuries that were still a problem for us at the time. We were down to around 28 or 29 fully effective personnel in 2018. Late in 2018, we actually did reach 41 of 41, but at that point, we had built back up and we had 36 effective. So still not where we wanted to be, but right back where we started when Chief Brown came on board. Moving into 2019, we gained another position and we were authorized 42. And that position was related to the expansion of the SRO program to 2 SROs rather than 1, which we had had in place for a couple of years at this point. So we finished out 2019 with about 39 staff that were available out of those 42 officers. And I think that takes me right about to where, I'll just, in 2020, we began 2020 with another bump to our staffing where we actually bumped from 42 to 44 officers that were authorized at that time. So then over to the first bullet point on the screen here, you'll see that in June and July of 2020, Sergeant Miller had been identified as the sergeant that we were going to place back into SSD. We were going to, with your blessing, bring SSD back and restaff that. So we brought first Sergeant Miller on. And during the time as we were building up to 2020, of course, there were a lot of things that came with the Boise decision and again, those homeless issues that we see around town and the other quality of life issues that we see that are a major problem for us in many jurisdictions across the state and country. So we identified Sergeant Miller, tasked him basically with coming back and rewriting a mission, a more expanded mission for special services to include those quality of life and homeless issues, but a continued focus on the street level narcotics and gangs. And so we simply said, we want to do what we were doing before, but we have some additional problems that take a lot more time, a lot more resources, and we think that this is the division that's going to be able to successfully address those things. So roll that into your building out of the mission and plan for SSD as it comes back online. Additionally, during that time, he was also asked to develop the selection process for identifying what we had told him would be 2 officers that we would be plugging back into Special Services Division. So August of 2020, again, now your second bullet point there on the PowerPoint, SSD goes live. It's full on. We've identified our 2 officers, Andy Sund and Albert Gonzalez, and we now have Sergeant Miller in place with his PROACT officers and the 2 school resource officers. So since then, SSD has just absolutely thrived within our area, and it has been recognized, and I'll get to this a little bit more later on, but when we launched SSD, with the support of the chief, with the support of you, we were able to shift that mission, expand that mission to address a larger variety of problems that we were experiencing as a community. What was started happening actually at my level, so as a captain and a chief at a county, there were a lot of eyes on us at Wenatchee Police Department and specifically focused in on SSD because everybody knew what SSD had been and what it became out of essence and need for the police department to address staffing issues and ultimately its demise. But everybody was hopeful that it would come back. And once we stood it back up, we knew that they were watching. And I was hearing from other administrators, chiefs at the counties saying, hey, we're really watching. We want to see what you guys are going to be able to do with this and see what this might present as far as opportunities for us in the future. And so they were already kind of planting the seed to where we'll end up tonight. So SSD, since it's come back online, has worked in every jurisdiction in the 2 counties. They've worked everything from robberies to drive-by shootings, and they've successfully addressed street-level drugs within the city limits of Wenatchee, as well as dealing with crime sprees, major crime, multiple occurrences of similar incidents, maybe a similar suspect group, and focusing on wanted person apprehension and all those kinds of things. So in addition to that, they've also worked very closely to try and supplement, to assist the Columbia River Drug Task Force in their investigations as well. So informants are a large part of the drug world. We had SSD on our side at Wenatchee Police Department that were developing street-level informants, but then you had the task force, which again, we'll get into this a little bit more, but they ran into some challenges too with some of the changes to the drug law with the Blake decision and some recent legislation that really limits law enforcement's ability to enforce simple possession as opposed to felony level possession with the intent to deliver or distribute drugs within a community. So, so that was kind of the global effect that SSD was having when they first came back on board. But here locally, as we discussed in the previous meeting, they have been, I would say, wildly successful at addressing our homeless issues within the parameters and guardrails that have been given to them by current case law. Sergeant Miller, got to give all the credit again to him, has developed a really great step-by-step process where he gets a complaint or patrol directs a complaint to him, and then he goes through a series of steps of multiple phone calls trying to identify owners of an RV or something like that. The most visible and initial problem that they were addressing in this area was out on Technology Center Way, out in the Ozone, where we had literally lines of RVs along the roadways out there that were being used as residences on the street. So within the parameters of the case law, Sergeant Miller started working a process from a law enforcement perspective, but also rolling in streets with the city, code enforcement with the city. We did signage changes. We tried to take it from a code enforcement angle because there were then and continue to be concerns about sewage dumping onto the street surfaces and things like that. So it was really, even within the city, Sergeant Miller developed a process that included many other city partners to address the issue and ultimately get to where we are today, which is a process that he's very well refined in. And we've added, again, in conjunction with our other city partners, we have a lot at the south end that we can utilize for once we work our way through those steps of tagging or making the notifications that we need to, or try to do those things and contact the people living in the motorhome, contact the registered owner if they're different people, which they very often are. Before we get to a point where still within the parameters of case law, we can then take that vehicle and we can move it from the very visible place that it is on the side of the street and take it down to this lot down on South Wenatchee, in South Wenatchee. And within the case law, what that has allowed us to do, one, is to get it out of the sight of the public, but it also is a resolution that's allowed us to stay within the case law to where we, the city, pay the bill for the tow initially to get it to the lot. And then we work with whoever's living in that to provide them information on how they can access, because they have to have access to their property. They have to have access to their residence. They can't stay in it when it's at the lot, but they can come and take it. They can come and retrieve it, drive it away. Or they can come and retrieve property from it if there's anything inside of it that they need. So even after hours, as we talked about in the previous meeting, there is a process for patrol or someone working at the police department. If they get a call from somebody who needs access to their vehicle, we can facilitate that with phone calls and contacts that we can make to our partners in the city to get them that access. So, so that was one of the, I would say, one of the most visible, very local focuses that SSD has, again, successfully been able to address within the city of Wenatchee. All the while, our partner agencies are watching all of this. They're reaping the benefits through major investigations. We heard from Chief Johnson at the Public Safety Committee meeting back in mid-2020, not too many months after SSD came back online in August. There was a midday shooting, drive-by shooting, gang-related drive-by shooting in the city of East Wenatchee, a block away from the police department. Both sides of the event were gang involved, multiple firearms involved in the incident, lots of people. There was a group of people at a residence that were targeted by a group of people in a vehicle. And our SSD was instrumental in assisting East Wenatchee Detectives Division in that investigation, identifying witnesses, identifying suspects, taking statements, collecting evidence, and ultimately making arrests. We all heard from Chief Johnson, 5 arrests. It sounds like 5 major felony arrests of local gang members came out of that partnership between our Special Services Division and the East Wenatchee Detectives Division. So, and all of those 5 people are facing either attempted homicide or first-degree assault charges with firearms as gang members, and potentially are looking at substantial prison sentences because of that investigation and the success that we saw through that partnership. So one more example that we see here locally that definitely impacts our community, but also impacts our neighbors. So Chief Johnson was one of the primary people that was focused on this. Chief Johnson was one of the original members of SSD, actually, when he was a member of our department. So he worked it as an officer, he worked it as a supervisor before leaving and progressing through his career as he has. So not surprisingly, a couple of months ago at our agency head regional meeting, Chief Johnson was the one that brought up and proposed regionalization and combining SSD and Drug Task Force. So part of that was motivated in the way that he articulated it, and I'll probably fall short of Rick's ability to articulate that, but it's a combination of things. There's legislation with the Blake decision that we talked a little bit about, which is a real challenge when you're doing drug enforcement, even at the task force level, because oftentimes your informants are personal use holders or users of drugs. They're not actually the person that the task force is targeting. They're the street level user that has the in as an informant to get the task force what they need to build a case against the guy who's actually selling the drugs, and maybe even the guy who's giving that guy his drugs to sell. So that's kind of the idea, but the challenge is that the street level drug enforcement with changes to the law has become a challenge. And so they've had to get very creative in how can we still cultivate informants and still be successful in what we're doing. And what we saw and what Chief Johnson pointed out kind of as his follow-up to the legislative concerns was the caseload in the Drug Task Force had dropped off significantly, and they were averaging maybe 1 or 2 new cases or active cases even in a single month. So more collective heads in the room trying to find more creative ways to develop informants, maybe charges that aren't necessarily related to drugs, but we know these people have a tie to the drug community. I mean, these are all the kinds of things that as we move forward with a regional attack to this, that, you know, our officers, our supervisors at the street level and our detectives are going to have to come up with those creative ways to find success. And I'm confident that they will. So So let's see. Um, I'll, actually, the last thing that I'll say here real quick, and I think I'll probably come back to it a little bit on the next slide, but there will be a piece of this that also talks about the expansion of the mission, what we saw with SSD in addressing homeless and quality of life issues is a problem in every community around here. And so they, in addition to seeing the successes with major criminal investigations, street level drug enforcement, they were also seeing the success that we were able to get within the city limits of Wenatchee in addressing our homeless issues and those other quality of life issues. So that whole picture is really what everybody is looking for, because here now, live in front of them, they're watching it work. They're watching a model that has been successful. So one thing that I want to say to all of you, to the mayor and each member of this council is thank you. If you, it didn't really hit me until I started making a few notes to prepare for today's presentation. But if you look back to where I started my timeline in 2016 with the staffing concerns that we had that came to crisis level a couple of years later in 2018, every single year, you guys authorized us additional personnel because we had a mission that we were aiming for. We developed a strategic plan through course of time as well. And you guys have been there at every single turn to support us in giving us the authorization to get to where we need to be to provide all of the services that our community deserves and needs from their law enforcement. So I just wanted to point that out, that doesn't go unnoticed, that in spite of these challenges that we were facing in staffing, you continued to add people to our authorized personnel and to our budget to allow us to continue to hire more and more good quality men and women to work at this police department. So last little fun fact I'll give you, and we'll go on to the next slide. To date, and I counted them up today with Sergeant Reinfeld, or Captain Reinfeld, Chief Crown, under the leadership of Chief Crown, we have sworn in 20 of our 43 current staff under Chief Crown. And those are retained working employees at our police department, 20. That doesn't include, unfortunately, along the way, we have some that aren't successful. If you include those, we've sworn in 26 officers since Chief Crown came on board and started leading this department. And it is because you guys have continued to support us in the way that you do. So thank you. So this will go much quicker than that last slide. But the current status of our project, we've had several meetings, regional agency head meetings. The first of which, of course, was the meeting where Chief Johnson made his pitch, and we jumped at the opportunity. Expanding the mission, great idea. Regionalization, great idea. It was last month, I think I was here talking to you about a regional, a truly regional multi-agency SWAT team that we're working on developing and hoping will launch January 1st. We have testing on November 2nd for that, so we're moving right along. But you'll see here on this slide, that concept, expanding the mission to address all those quality of life issues that, again, touch every community. Want to focus on as well, though, that the mission will still very much include drugs and gangs, which are two of the top concerns for residents and citizens of all of our jurisdictions. And so that will continue to be a focus. There are burn JAG grant fundings that come from the federal level that fund out to task forces all over the state. In Washington State, there's several task forces that receive burn JAG funding, and our task force is one of those. I want to assure you that the changes that we're making in mission will not affect our ability to access those burn JAG funds. And spoke to a representative over at the task force, the analyst actually that works at the task force currently, about that. So the bulk of expenditure for office supplies, computer things, tools, equipment, travel, training, repairs and maintenance to vehicles, buy funds to actually do drug transactions as using UCs or undercover officers or confidential informants. So all of that stuff that allows the operational funding essentially for this task force and for this regional task force to continue comes from those burn JAG funds. And currently they have over $311,000 in their fund to run their task force. So each individual agency that contributes a detective, that person, their wages and benefits still come out of that parent agency's budget. But once they're a member of that, the training and things specific to their assignment in the task force then transfer over and start coming out of a fund that is specific to the task force with the burn JAG funds. Currently and into the future, Chelan County is going to continue to be the parent agency with that, and we'll touch on that a little bit. I have an organizational chart that's the last slide, but it's been updated. So I'll kind of talk you through those updates real quick. Right away at that first meeting, we left that meeting with the task of pulling the current Columbia River Drug Task Force ILA and looking at it to revamp it to fit what we're talking about here today, and regionalizing and blending of SSD and the CRDTF. So that is in process. It's under review right now. We just did another review of it this morning at the task force meeting with the agency heads and the board that were able to be present. And so that is still at the agency head level for review. And once it gets through the agency heads, it will move on to legal, just like the other ILAs would, like we discussed with the regional SWAT. So I'm going to reluctantly, I'll go ahead and show you this. It's not terribly wrong, but I'll, with Mr. Huffaker here, I'll pass around the updated version. So part of this, what you'll see on the updated version that's coming around is just off to the right there at the top under this, under the board, the first box is a CCSO Chief of Operations, which will be Chris Foreman. The edited version has me directly to the side of the CCSO Chief. The reason for that is because all the burn JAG funds come through CCSO, and rather than try to transition the burn JAG funds going to a different entity, CCSO agreed to essentially stay the parent agency that has the authorization to basically handle and distribute and manage the funds that we talked about here at the 300,000 plus. So the only other edit that you'll see in that is that lower down here, if you get to the dark blue WPD box and follow it down to the next blue box, you'll see me there. That's my position. Again, that box has been moved up to the top and is now to the side of the CCSO chief. And the last edit was to connect the line from the top CCSO box down to the operations box as well. So WPD, we put the WPD under operations because it is now going to be a WPD sergeant that is going to be supervising all of the members of the task force. He will be reporting to myself and to Chief Foreman on November 1st when he takes his position, but to that chief at CCSO as well. What that allows us is it allows us to maintain the funding under CCSO without any questions or concerns from anyone regarding where or who is managing those funds. But it also adds a second layer of command level supervision for operational purposes primarily. The chief position at CCSO will still be the one primarily doing the reports back to the board, but operationally, we both will be available to Sergeant Miller or to an officer in charge or whoever is running whatever street level boots on the ground operation they have going. Much like what we'll see with the regional SWAT, I'm certain that the chief and I over at CCSO will be talking frequently about operations because we all have staff that are going to be involved in those things. So two heads are always better than one. If there's things that need to be discussed, I assure you they will. A great thing too to just throw out there for you is Chief Foreman, who again will take over on November 1st, and that role at Chelan County is a former sergeant and supervisor of the Drug Task Force. So he has a very good grasp, not only operationally and boots on the ground, but being the supervisor, he's been in a lot of those Drug Task Force board meetings, knows the types of information, knows how the funding can be spent, and all those kinds of things. So
are the school resource officers still on there?
So
I see that 3-2 number, and I'm just trying to figure out, does that mean school resource officers are still going to report through SSD?
Good question, but the answer to that specific question is no.
Okay.
This organizational chart is specific to the Columbia River Drug Task Force or the Regional Task Force, whatever it ends up being called. And what you're seeing there with each down below or to the side, I guess, of the sergeant position is the staffing that will be provided by each of our partner agencies in the form of a detective or a task force agent that will work and report directly to the sergeant.
Thank you.
Any questions about anything?
Just for clarity, too, the reason why you have to see these last two
Yeah.
is because as you start up the task force under this model, it's probably going to be a 6-month overlap with one of our.
Okay.
That will probably come back to another place in our.
Any other questions about anything that I?
Will that take care of the first 2 dots then, sort of? Or is that just the first dot on your discussion?
On the, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so on your agenda, special services has now been covered and Columbia River Drug Task Force has been covered.
And the thought at this point,
Thank you.
we talked about a little bit at the public safety meeting, is this location, these workers will be located at the East Wenatchee Police Department's new building they're purchasing on the top floor. So just from where are they going to go to work every day? That's where the drug task force will go. You know, currently they're in our old police department. So that actually gets that completely freed up for selling at some point because the drug task force is in there now and IT is in there. So IT will move here, drug task force will move there.
Yep.
So that sort of frees that up. So we'll have a number of our paid officers will be going to work over there, but that's where they're working with the East Wenatchee guys and they'll be going back and forth. And they bought a new building sort of on Simon Street there, the old aging. Yeah. Yeah, so they'll be running, I think the entire East Wenatchee Police Department at some point will run out of the main floor and then this, wherever you're gonna call it, special division or whatever it's gonna be, will be running out of the top floor.
Yeah, well, the plan is for the task force to take up a portion of that second floor and they're actively looking for other renters because it is, even the second floor is quite a large space. And so they've been approached by some and they're seeking others that are law enforcement related that may be interested in leasing or renting some of that space on the second floor that isn't going to be utilized by the task force. So, and lastly, and I'll get out of here, but those green boxes across there, those are all staying where they're at. Mayor mentioned the facility, the physical location is being provided by East Wenatchee Police Department. We're providing operations in the form of the supervisor and myself working with Chief from Chelan County. And then again, what we discussed with the burn JAG funds, that's why you see the finance piece remaining under CCSO and the administrative piece is actually the analyst position. So currently Peg Roberts is the analyst. She's going to be retiring. CCSO has posted and it has 3 interviews. Is that what we heard? 3 interviews scheduled for someone to fill that position when PEG vacates. So they're just trying to get that going to get as much overlap and on-the-job training for that person because it's a very specialized position, and PEG's been there a long time, and we're going to miss her. So
Good.
if there's no other questions.
Any
that's-
questions for Captain?
I'll just throw out a comment that came up in public safety today. The East Wenatchee police chief actually joined us in our meeting
Rick,
today. And he had good things to say. And it was great hearing how this was able to solve some gang shootings in a rapid amount of time. I told him, I said, this is a great goal. This is wonderful. We don't want to be like Yakima. And his officer that came with him seconded that because he's from Yakima.
Yeah.
He says, I don't know what they did in Yakima, but you guys are doing it right, and they missed the boat. So I told these guys, we stand behind our law enforcement 100%, and we stand behind what's happening, and we want this to continue to go forward to keep Wenatchee a great place.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, all right. Thanks, Captain.
Thank you.
Thank you, Captain.
Thanks again.
All right, mental health, field response team.
I brought a guest,
Excellent.
and Hector was unaware he was a guest until this morning at shift change.
All right. Hey, Hector, how are you?
Good
Good.
evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Captain Edgar Reinfeld, Wenatchee Police. Hector, introduce yourself, please.
My name is Hector Avila. I work on the diversion team for Catholic Charities.
Excellent.
And so we're going to talk at the request of Councilman Bailey at the last council meeting, come to this work session and give kind of a history where we're at, where we might be going, and what it might look like. And I realized that we should probably bring somebody from Catholic Charities. Hector is one of our dedicated visitors at 7 o'clock in the morning to get turnover 5 days a week from our officers, and also to provide us with information about what they're doing or who they need to find so that we can help find them. This presentation is actually based on the presentation that I've used 4 years in a row to seek our grant and acquire our grant funding under the WASPIC Mental Health Field Response Team grant. Now, I cut out like 18 slides because we don't need to deal with that. We added a few more to talk about what we're doing here and why it matters and why it's a model for the state. So our brief history, and I've said it before at council meetings, in 2015, persons in crisis and mental health in our area were treated in the same three solutions. You leave them where they're at until they cause so much trouble that you do one of the other two solutions. Or that one of those other two solutions is take them to jail, which is not productive. I think Hector would agree with that it's rarely our most productive methodology. And of course, the other is take them to the emergency room and wait up to 4 hours for a mental health professional to come evaluate them and probably put them back on the street so we can go back to our same, at that point, almost binary solution set. The bonus solution was some enterprising officer driving them to another jurisdiction, which is rarely effective, and we are usually the recipient of such visits and not so much the givers. They just, if you leave them out there, just generate additional calls for service until sooner or later we have to take one of the above actions. But what happened here in 2015, Eric Skansgaard at the time came here, part of Catholic Charities, really out of their True Blood program. True Blood is designed to take people who are mentally ill and end up in jail, end up in the court system. It's not their best place. It came out of a settlement for someone named True Blood who was held for a very long time and suffered with his mental illness. He just went in jail to figure out what to do with him. And so Eric suggested, hey, let's not have these people go that far. Let's try to reach out and stop some of your high volume contacts. And so he partnered with me first, and then we started spreading to the department. We started doing some stuff. Our first year case, that was our big high volume contact case, was a guy of the initials TV. We had 57 calls for service and 2 arrests with him in 2014 and 2015. Now, TV sometimes would be 6 or 7 calls a day. We might have 1 call for service. People would call in over and over, we'd reopen and go contact him. Yeah, he's on the sidewalk, he's screaming gibberish, he's occasionally throwing stuff in the road, but he's not causing any harm. But routinely, we'd still arrest him. So it was not a very good outcome. Crisis response, diversion at that time, came out and talked to him at some point. Since November 2nd, 2015, I updated this, only 4 calls for service in almost 6 years. 0 arrests, and the 4 calls for service were all him calling about something else that was going on because he's a more well-adjusted and functional member of our society. Now, to get there, took diversion contacting him, took 120 days at Eastern State Hospital when that was still a thing to work this way, medication balancing, appropriate treatment, counseling, a lot of investment. However, He quit being a burden on our community because our community acted to do something different with him instead of just continuously reacting to him. So coming out of this, we added more diversion staff and contacts started shooting up. The program expanded the frequency of meetings. Hector, how often do you guys meet with people aside from us? We're about 5 days a week.
You're 5 days a week. We meet with Douglas County once a week on Wednesdays. Saline County, it's hit or miss, especially with the new program that they're kind of working with. But normally on a monthly basis, at least once or twice. In East Wenatchee, it comes and goes with them.
We started, Douglas County jumped on board. Chief Steve Grossclose is very passionate about mental health issues and about mental health care, and jumped on board. East Wenatchee followed, Saline County rolled in. So we got everybody involved. And that took us to this first mental health field response team grant that popped up for the grant year 2018 to 2019. The grant we're talking about runs on the state's fiscal year, so July 1 through June 30th, which we're all familiar with one source of funding or another. So the first year, Eric and I built an application. We went over to Lacey, got in front of Waspic, made our pitch for a 2-county system. Our proposal was different than everyone else's. Everyone else's were based mostly on single agencies doing a ride-along program. We're going to hire a DCR, a designated crisis responder. We're going to put them in the car with an officer. They're going to roll around 40 hours a week and do their thing. We did it differently because of the 2-county area. We send somebody to Mansfield, they can't help here. Here, they can't help in Mansfield, they're stuck in a patrol car. So that first year we were granted over $92,000. The goal was to hire and pay for almost fully a new DCR. Failed. Interviewed a bunch of people, nobody was really suited to the position. So instead, started working the stipend shift model that's still in place today. Somebody's on a stipend shift right now. In fact, they're up at Colonial Vista dealing with a mentally ill person we've been dealing with for several days with one of our officers. Exactly what it's supposed to do. We're not dragging them to the hospital waiting for hours. They're out.
Is this a Catholic family employee?
Yes,
That's
sir.
doing that? Okay, thank you.
So one of our officers and then the DCR is an employee of Catholic Family. They also bought a radio scanner so they could hear our calls and they could proactively respond to calls. That was part of the grant funding. We spent $159 on a radio scanner. It broke all the time. I reprogrammed it like 11 times. They finally got tired of doing that, and they realized there were free apps on the phone that did the same. So the radio scanner is at Catholic Charities somewhere, hopefully smashed in a corner because it quit working so much. We started that work October 1st of 2018. It took us a while to get the grant contract signed with City Council, and they didn't proactively pay over that gap because it was the first time. So through June 30th of 19, we spent just under $52,000, only 56% of our grant dollars. Again, it was geared toward an FTE and some benefits and all that stuff, and instead we ended up paying people a fixed stipend at an hourly rate for 8 hours a shift. Now, in that period, October 1st through June 30th, we contacted 311 people during grant contacted hours in the 2 counties. 292 hours were spent with those 311 people. And the average response times to calls in the core valley here, not in 2 counties, was 8.6 minutes. So we went from 4 hours waiting at the hospital to 8.5 minutes. That alone is worth the price of admission. It's cost effective, it's better for everybody. We expected a new grant cycle, but it came late. It was after the grant ended, Catholic Charities decided we'll pick up the program through August 15th out of pocket. And we were awarded a new grant in September 2019. So year 1 successful. Eric and I went back to Waspic. A little bit different group we sat in front of, kind of the same pitch. Offer extended for a second year. So grant year 2, we were awarded $56,070 to fund the stipend shifts. We had other requests in there for some equipment and some stuff that were denied. They're just like, we're paying for bodies because we want the program to touch more places in the state. Each year of this grant, so year 1, I think we're only 5 programs. Year 2, I think there were 8. Year 3 was the same 8. We'll get to COVID and how that impacted this. Now there's 14, all from the same pool of money. We're doing a lot of damage with a relatively little amount of money from the state. Good deal. Catholic Charities suspended the program manager and one of the DCRs September of that year. We just got started. Some personnel got suspended. That program manager then killed himself. And so we had a big break, and it broke our data collection. So we have no idea what's happening. And the wheels really fell off. Our work ran from October 1st through February 29th of 2020. We didn't get to the end of the grant year because COVID shut it down. So we only spent $21,899. Only 39% of our grant funds were expended. Thankfully, Waspic is forgiving in this and understanding. We related the issues to them, accepted it, we're good. 311 contacts in year one, only 27 documented contacts in year two. Our contact number was probably more like 150 in our limited time span, but we have no data. Zero supporting data. We know how much money we spent. That's what we know. DCR spent 15 hours on those 27 contacts. Again, the numbers mean nothing. Response time about 10 minutes. New management at Catholic Charities worked very hard to restaff through this COVID period when they're shut down from field operations. Now, we could still call. When were you hired, Hector?
July 2020?
Yeah, sounds about right from when you started appearing with us.
Yeah.
So in this next window, June of 2020 rolled around and I got an email from John McGrath at Waspic saying, hey, you want to renew your grant? Just send us our basic proposal again. Reworded the proposal for next year, submitted. And we were fortunate and were renewed again. The big success here was year three that we just concluded back here in June. We were awarded $56,070 again. Right about the time Hector got hired, we started field operations again with Catholic Charities. They really come out with us on calls. Management had rebuilt the team because there was a single holdover staff member from the turmoil at the end of 2019. Got a team back together, has continued working at it. We went back to doing field response in August, but no grant-funded hours. We eased back into it to be sure it was going to work. But September 1st, we kicked it back off. So September 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021, we ran our operations. We spent $55,957 or 99.8% of our grant funding. We lost a couple of months on the front end. We have the latitude to spend those dollars. We loaded the back end of the year, and it turned out to be a critical thing. We had 601 documented contacts that year. So high year was 311, double. DCR spent 261 hours. It was 292 that first year. Third year, they spent less time contacting a lot more people. Was it busy?
Yes.
We'll show a little bit of busy here in a minute. Average response time ended up being about 11 minutes. During this grant year, Chelan County also formed their behavioral health unit concept, which we'll talk about in just a minute. Waspic announced a fourth year for the grant. We pursued it, and we're awarded a fourth year for the grant as I came to you last month with a council meeting to get the contract signed, and we're moving forward on that. Conveniently now, Waspic going, yeah, we know you're going to get it signed. We'll pay the interim, so there's no more issues with that. Grant year three looked like this. As COVID-19 restrictions came off, the need for services exploded. A reference for this program, Spokane County's Behavioral Health Unit told us they're getting more than $1 million from the state a year to work their program up. Their threshold for an appropriate number of contacts on $1 million a year is 30 a month. Our low month was 24, our high month was 133. So the first month on that graph is September, the spike is May. And in 2021, it went out of control, wildfire. Using them, bam, 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 over and over and over again as we neared the end of this year and we approached this new threshold of July 25th and no longer having the ability to use force to detain individuals who are mentally ill. So the creativity period is still being fleshed out. We're working on it. This contact up at Colonial Vista right now is really interesting because we have an officer up there who can't force this guy who probably is going to need to go somewhere to do anything, but we're going to be there to support our DCR to help make that decision.
So you say in Colonial Vista, is he in a room or is he in a parking lot
So
or
it's
is he on the grass? Or?
it's in the apartment section in Colonial Vista 3.
Okay.
657 Okanagan are all independent living apartments. They're
Got
just geared towards seniors
Okay.
who can use some support. So
Okay.
we've been doing this for several days. It's kind of peaking. We're up there right now trying
Okay.
to resolve it. So like I said, we spent that grant by scheduling the tar out of people. We went to like 50 hours a week extra in June and in May and June to get the grant money spent, but also when we look at the numbers of contacts, justifiable, totally a valid use of the dollars. We had them, we were able to leverage them against the problem in our communities, which is great. We also, though, as it concluded year three, the stipend rate had been the same since we started the program. So the economy moves on, people move on, retention's a problem. We're still paying them the same thing we were paying them 3 years ago. We worked with Catholic Charities down in Yakima to come up with a more true rate for what it costs to put these folks out there and what they felt was appropriate to receive. And we worked that into our grant. So this fourth year, we were, let's see here. We'll go back to the fourth year in a minute. The fourth year, we were awarded more like $73,000 For the same amount of services, we looked for $56,000 before. Our state of affairs, when we made our proposal in May of 21, this is the good thing. After 3 years of this, officers and deputies throughout the 2 counties, throughout the 2 jurisdictions, know the DCR staff. At least the ones working any given moment. There's a lot of turmoil, a lot of change sometimes. We always bring the new ones in. They get to know them. We know them in the field. There's a monthly schedule provided to agencies and dispatch in advance by Catholic Charities going, hey, these are the planned days. Diversion staff is contacted directly. So we got a field contact. You had the phone most of the day today, correct? Did you get any calls today?
Randy did.
Randy
But-
had the phone.
But I believe he had, from you guys, 1 call and then 1 from East Wenatchee, so.
Throughout the day, the person who's working the stipend shift right now that's covered by the grant is on a call. So again, a contact has been generated today and more to come possibly. If diversion couldn't get out there, at least we can call them on the phone. We have a phone number that we're provided every day in an email. Here's who's on call, here's their phone number, here's their hours. Call them during those hours. If it's after hours, call crisis. We work same plan. The BHU deputies, a new concept for Chelan County. They're building this concept of a behavioral health unit that may supplant, may change how this stuff goes. We'll see what's happening. Right now, they have a DCR who was formerly with Catholic Charities, who can't work as a DCR right now because how the state licenses all this stuff. It's weird.
Okay.
We'll see how it settles. But they're working this, and they're working. They've got a deputy assigned who's doing at least 1 shift a week. He does nothing but check on these folks, do diversion stuff. And it may be a growth to yet another regional
But
agreement.
he's probably not doing stuff inside the city limits of the city of Wenatchee, or is he doing it throughout the county?
Throughout the county, including some stuff within the city, though not our calls. They're calls that he's self-generating, or they're following up with somebody they may have dealt with in the county who happens to live in the city.
Got it. Okay.
And all of our contacts are tracked. Each of the 4 agencies now tracks mental health contacts in their own way in our collective records management system. So we pull 4 different reports. The net result is, though, we can see the effect of all of this from a law enforcement perspective and for our dollars and cents that we're putting into it. On mental health, in May, it was there was a DCR, 4 MHPs, a case manager, and a program assistant. Where are we today?
I'm working on getting a manager. He will go in effect November 16th. 1 case manager, 1 MHP, 1 new case manager coming on board November 1st.
A high turnover field.
Yep.
And I will give Catholic Charities a mountain of credit. When the diversion manager left to go work for BHU, kind of looked like the handwriting might be on the wall. It was going to disintegrate, but that's not what happened. They rose up, they adapted, they dealt with their issues. We're still fully serving the community like we should, which is excellent. As we've gone, yes, sir.
The issues in terms of retaining people in that profession, is it pay? Is it, I mean, what sorts of issues on us, Hector? What's causing the high turnover? Is it just super stressful job, or, I mean, what's the,
I mean, with mental health, it's always going to be, it's a super stressful job. Pay, I mean, as it's been seen in the area, housing is expensive. It's gone up.
Okay.
So bringing people from different areas tends to be not the biggest pay, to get people to generally stay.
Okay.
Most of the retention, since coming in July last year, the entire team has turned over. Currently one of the longest on the team.
well, again, from my perspective, I'm trying to figure out, I don't want the team to turn over.
We'll talk about something in a minute.
And we
here.
need to figure out a way to make it so they want to be here.
Absolutely.
Besides your good looks and all that other good
Yeah,
stuff.
my
Why they
stunning
want to be here.
personality.
Yes.
Yeah, terrible. But also, by May, we had Parkside open as an evaluation and treatment center. So we're one of the most fortunate communities in the state that if we do have a person who is going to be involuntarily detained, we have some beds locally. They could be full and we might be out of luck like everybody else. But we found we've got beds. If we can get them to an involuntary detention, we have a place they can go. 90% of the state doesn't, to include King County. So grant year 4, you said we just got awarded $73,000 and change to do the same thing. Work started immediately on July 1st. We were working June 30th, and July 1st, we just kept going. The program manager was actually terminated when she tendered a notice that she was going to resign. So we had a fracture in data collection, but we were able to recover everything, which was great. It was the first time we've had a turnover where we didn't lose data. We have spent 20% of our grant funds in the first quarter of the year that we've been operating. So we're a little under our pace, but at the end of the year, we've seen we can do this makeup, and the demand was really high. It'll be perfect timing to do so. In the first quarter of this grant year, we had 166 documented contacts. It's 66% higher than last year's record year. Indicative that we're trains on the tracks, and we're going to roll into some really interesting times this winter and next spring. DCR spent 87 hours in contact. It's 201% higher than the first 3 months of the last grant year. We are spending more time with them because we have taken away law enforcement's ability to go, it's time to get on the gurney, and you're getting on the gurney.
Right.
So we're going to spend more time talking. DCRs are going to spend more time talking while we are literally 100 feet away watching to be sure nobody gets hurt.
Right.
Not that we can directly impact over that 100-foot gap and stop something bad, but we're there to be sure it doesn't progress. Just where we're at with law in the state today. Need's going to be high. We're rolling into 24 months of COVID here soon. Any other global pandemics over the history of humanity are holding true. We've got a few months of this left, and we can come out of the backside of this. But in the meantime, people are stressing, and they're decompensating, and we're going to keep utilizing this group. So the road ahead. As noted, Hector, they're working on their diversion manager. It's the third one in 4 years. That's tough. We keep going. New restrictions on use of force means we can't detain some of these people. Catholic Charities is not going to be able to detain them. We're going to go back to having some high-volume contacts. In fact, Laura, unfortunately, yesterday had a high-volume contact experience. Because you
She
called
did
it,
or your car
right?
did?
Her car did.
Okay, I know your car, I heard your car
The
did.
person she saw behaving the way they were, she experienced it. She saw
Okay.
it. It's bad enough. The car had a worse go.
Okay.
We're going to see it, and we're going to escalate back to the point they go to jail, most likely. We're resetting because of some changes in law. In a few years, we'll probably see it roll back. Chelan County's BHU could become a big player, but that becomes dependent on getting licensing, being appropriately funded, having everything work out the way it could work out.
Mhm.
And in fact, this comes down to the reality. This grant is going to end at some point.
It's going to what?
It's going to end at some point. Like I said at the council meeting, year one felt great. Year two, like amazing. Got a second year, it's not going to happen again. Ooh, 3, now 4.
Right.
This is amazing. But at some point, it's going to end. So our communities need to be prepared to do something, whether it's a preparation to think about funding.
Can
This
we
sort
use our
of
homeless
extended coverage.
dollars for this stuff?
Potentially.
Can we use some of our 1/10 for
There's an
that?
intersection, absolutely, and this may be an opportunity for us, and it'd be on a regional basis. BHU, like Chelan County, has started maybe the kernel of a regional BHU. Alternately, as we go into the contracting year, it happens every year, these contracts for diversion and crisis are managed by the state through the behavioral health organization, it flows down through the MCA, it flows down through the pipeline of these agencies that are funded by Medicaid. We may need to write the contracts that we want 76 or 80 hours of coverage in our communities. So it's written into the contract from the first point. So that we're not reliant on grant funding.
Right.
So that we may in the contract be able to do some matching funds with $15.90 or other sources we haven't even considered yet. So I think this might be the last slide. It is. We've done great things. Councilman Bailey wanted some of the anecdotal things. We've averted at least 4 SWAT calls, including 2 in the city, to people that are right there in their name record. They are such an officer safety concern. If we do a risk assessment, we're escalating to a SWAT call.
Mhm.
We intercede with a DCR, with a diversion person, makes a call, makes communication. Maybe they already know Hector because they've dealt with him a few times before in a different situation where it didn't escalate, they didn't barricade, and we talk them into a different place and the actions change. We avert suicides. That one that was really a really detailed plan, and when we called family members like, this guy says he's going to kill himself, where is he? We really don't care, we're tired of it. That happened. Horrible. Involved diversion over, you were on several hours?
No day off, but.
Day off it. Several hours, sorry, it was somebody else caught it instead of Hector, but
You
several
should have
hours.
said it was you. You would have been fine. We wouldn't have
Yeah.
known.
Yeah.
I was at home. I'm still, we have great communication with our team. So we have a group thing. We're constantly communicating, letting everyone know, especially with the safety concerns.
Right.
we're limited on what we have, so we always make sure we know where our team is, what they're dealing with. So we're always in contact of what's going on,
Okay.
and at least 15 minutes of, are you okay?
Yeah.
And so that one, by, start picking at this and start scratching at it, find him at the hospital, get some resources aligned, got family involved, who decided they did indeed care what happened to their uncle. We averted this. It ended badly a couple months later, but his big plan and his big show, we had one more opportunity to help him. And in the end, it wasn't successful because he had made a decision, but we had another opportunity to help him. And some of the best ones, though, are we had a mother and daughter appear in Leavenworth. It's an adult daughter, mother. The daughter routinely decompensates, routinely has her episodes where she is completely out of control, and mom is like, get out of the car. I'm going back to Linwood, and I don't care what happens to you. We have imports here all the time. However they get here is however they get here. This would be a really bad way to receive somebody that we know nothing about, who is in crisis, is rapidly decompensating, and instead got diversion, got DCR involved, phone calls at first, working their way toward Leavenworth, make contact with mom, make contact with daughter, get daughter in a better place, get mom settled down, get them on Highway 2, and get them back in King County. Instead of having this adult female with no resources, poor self-control, and in crisis appearing in our communities and not knowing how to deal with her and knowing nothing about her history or anything else. So it works. What we're doing works. If it's just 40 hours a week, it works okay. When we have the additional time provided by the grant, it works better. So as we look toward next year, 1590 funds will have flowed. We can look at this, but we have to recognize as local government entities at some point, we're going to have to start putting some cash into this aside just from officer time. The good thing is it's not much to extend the coverage, but if we did it right and actually had an additional DCR hired, it would cost a little more. But $120,000 a year between 4 entities doesn't seem that bad, depending on how it plays out, depending on what sources are available, and depending on what matching funds may be available as we go ahead. Hopefully this goes on until I retire with this grant. I can almost go make the pitch with my eyes closed at this point. I just need new numbers. But any questions you have about
So,
what we're
Captain,
doing.
what I would tell you, if you think it's working and if funding's an issue, or we don't get, you need to keep coming back and say, I need money so we can continue to do the program. If you think it needs to be expanded in some way, I don't like the fact that we get qualified people like Hector and he's not getting paid enough and we don't pay him, or I don't know how that all works.
or we trick him into being an officer and then we have to
Okay.
replace him because
But
we're
I'm just
working on
telling
that
you,
too.
if there's a methodology to this to make it so it's a more permanent position and that we, let us know what we can do from a funding standpoint to help with that.
And it strikes me, it seems to me that the county's ability to do a 0.1% council managed
Right.
sales tax for behavioral health, this
And it's something the
There's a
county's
region-
actively talking about
there's a
using
regional
dollars like that
Yeah.
for it.
benefit
They are talking about
them
it.
taking that action.
Yeah.
That's Douglas County is the outlier, like East Wenatchee's pursued 1590, which can be applied to this. We believe the chief and I have talked about it a great deal. East Wenatchee's pursued that. Chelan County is considering the 1/10 for behavioral health, which would be a massive pile of money. Douglas County is the outlier, but again, we have even more passionate, Steve Grosclose is more passionate than me about this.
Yeah.
I'm driven by this. I've got a debris field of stuff behind me with this, and I still believe in it fully. Steve is on fire about it every day. Douglas County wouldn't leave anybody holding the bag on this.
Right.
Because he'll hassle them into doing something, and Steve is really annoying. Right?
Great, thanks.
Well, thanks both of you. Hector, very nice to meet you. And again, let us know what we
Hector,
can do
I've heard
to.
great things about you. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Captain. From the get-go, this made a whole lot of sense. And, it's obviously it's a thing you have to feel your way through, and they keep moving the goalposts and all this kind of stuff. But this is the kind of thing that, and I go around talking to different places in the state and whatever, people ask, well, what are you doing about this or whatever? And I promote this program. I said, this is what we are doing here in Wenatchee, and it's working. And a lot of places aren't doing anything.
Yes, sir.
So thank you for your managing all of this. Hector, thank you for your service in working on this.
Great. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, guys.
All right, council members, so we'll be in regular session next week. Saw the agenda, didn't look too big, but we'll be in regular session next Thursday.
Very good.
That's all I got.